Once upon a time, in an ancient kingdom, a king ruled from a high position. The king was not only powerful, but also renowned for his wisdom and intellect. However, there was one flaw that always interfered with his life and kingdom. He would say, "Though I am the master of my kingdom's destiny, my intellect and understanding always seem to lack in some way." This statement revealed the king's inner turmoil. He constantly wondered if his ministers and advisors were not as wise and understanding as he needed them to be. But one day, fate showed him a path that would not only change his life, but also the destiny of his entire kingdom. One day, the king decided to leave his kingdom and experience the natural world. The purpose of the journey was to calm his mind and understand if the solution to his kingdom's issues lay in nature. He set off with his loyal ministers on a journey through the forest. The journey began on a beautiful and peaceful day. The king and his ministers wandered until they reached a large tree under which sat a person. This person was making strange movements and at times laughing, at times appearing sorrowful. The king and his ministers observed him closely. The person was not an ordinary man, but appeared to be a madman. The king's heart was uncertain about him, thinking, "Is this person truly mad, or does he possess some special intellect?" The king approached him and decided to speak with him. His ministers objected to this, but the king said, "This may be a part of our fate. Perhaps we can learn something from him." The king asked the man, "Why are you sitting here? You seem mad, yet there is a strange light in your eyes." The madman smiled and replied, "You are the mad ones, for you know nothing about your kingdom and its destiny. I am here because this forest, this tree, and everything here is just as it should be. And that is the greatest wisdom." The king listened in amazement. There was a secret in the madman's words that the king and his ministers failed to understand. The king decided to speak with him further to gauge his intellect. The madman said to the king, "If you wish, I can tell you something, but you must be willing to surrender your entire kingdom to understand my words." The king's mind became confused for a moment, but then he thought, "Perhaps this person is the answer I have been searching for." He instructed his ministers to bring the man with him to his palace so he could keep him as a part of the court. The ministers protested, "Your Majesty, this person is mad. What use will it be to bring him into the palace?" But the king ignored their objections and decided to take the madman with him. When the madman arrived at the palace, his behavior and words became even more intriguing. He sat before the king and said calmly, "What have you done here? You have sold the destiny of your kingdom." The king listened carefully and said, "Do you think I can learn something from your intellect?" The madman smiled and replied, "No one in your kingdom knows anything about their destiny. Your court, your advisors, they are all merely deceiving you." The king pondered his words and then consulted with his advisors. The advisor said, "Your Majesty, this person is just here to waste our time." But the king said, "No, this man might be telling us the truth we are unable to see." Days went by, and the madman began to use such wisdom that the problems of the kingdom started to resolve. With his advice, the kingdom's economy improved, strategies to deal with enemies changed, and hypocrisy was eradicated. As the madman's presence began to change the kingdom's fate, fear and jealousy grew in the hearts of the ministers. Those who had always prided themselves on their positions and status now feared that this madman might undermine their power. A new force was rising in the kingdom, and that force was the simplicity and wisdom of the madman. One day, an important meeting took place in the court. The king addressed his ministers, saying that they should use this new wisdom and intellect for the benefit of the kingdom. The madman was present at the meeting, and his words were being taken very seriously. Each of his statements held a new secret that illuminated the king's mind even further. But the ministers thought that if this madman gained importance in the kingdom, their positions would be at risk. Some of them began whispering among themselves, "If we don't deal with this madman, he will seize our positions." They devised a deep conspiracy. Their plan was to somehow remove the madman from the palace to protect their own positions and power. Eventually, this conspiracy was about to unfold, but once again, the madman's wisdom thwarted their plans. One day, when the madman was supposed to advise the king on an important decision, one of the ministers whispered in his ear, "If you lay your hand on the king's back, your fate will change." The madman understood the minister's words and ignored their signals while formulating a new strategy. He approached the king, stood before him, and said, "Your Majesty, I have discovered a great truth, which you may not like, but it could save the fate of your kingdom." The king fixed his gaze on him and asked, "What is this truth?" The madman lowered his head and said, "If you do not recognize the intentions of your ministers, your kingdom will never progress toward success. Their truth and loyalty are only a show for you." The king's eyes widened in disbelief. He immediately questioned his ministers, "Is this true?" The ministers, panicking, replied, "Your Majesty, this is just a lie. This man is only trying to deceive us." The madman did not hesitate to say, "Do you think you do not know the truth? I have come to believe that these ministers are about to become your enemies." The king thought for a moment and then said, "If this is true, I must investigate it." The king began an inquiry into the ministers and found the madman's words to be true. The king then issued a new decree and punished the ministers for their conspiracies. The madman's wisdom and truth had won yet another great victory. The minister's plot was foiled, and the king began to embrace this man as his advisor. This was the moment when the madman had truly changed the fate of the kingdom. The king acknowledged the madman's truth and wisdom and appointed him as the special advisor in his court. But the minister's jealousy was far from over. They knew that the increasing importance of the madman meant their own influence would diminish, and if this continued, they would never regain their positions. The ministers devised a new plot. They decided to put the madman to another test, to prove that, despite appearing wise, he was truly nothing special. This time, they forced him into a complicated and difficult strategy. One day, an important issue arose in the court. The king needed a new strategy to confront his enemies. The ministers asked the madman to provide a solution. They thought that if they posed a difficult question and the madman could not answer, his true nature would be exposed. The madman listened to the question seriously, and then smiled, replying, "I will provide a solution that will not only defeat the enemies, but make them our allies." The king was taken aback, and asked, "How is this possible?" The madman replied, "If we win the enemy over to our side, we won't need to fight them. We don't need their power, we need their loyalty." This was a new perspective, and the king immediately praised the madman's wisdom. He granted the madman full freedom to implement his strategy. The madman began executing his plan, which focused on building trust among the enemies. At first, the enemies were astonished, but gradually, due to the madman's sincerity and understanding, they began to accept his words. Eventually, the enemies gave up their plans to fight, and a peace treaty was signed between the two kingdoms. This success was a testament to the madman's exceptional wisdom and loyalty. The ministers, still secretly scheming, now had to face the growing respect and influence of the madman. The king made another decision against them. He summoned all the ministers and said, "Now, I want to ask you all something. Over the past few days, you have challenged my decisions, belittled the wisdom of the madman, and schemed for your own benefit. But I have learned one thing, and that is, that truth always prevails." The king then called the madman, and said, "This person is the one who saved our kingdom from our enemies, showed us the way of truth, and proved that the one, whom the world considers mad, is actually the wisest. Now I am appointing him as my special advisor, and you all must remember that the path of truth always leads to success." The ministers' faces were now filled with sadness and despair, but the madman's heart was filled with joy. His simplicity, loyalty, and wisdom had finally brought him to the place he truly deserved. After this, his importance in the kingdom grew even more. The madman's wisdom not only transformed the court, but also the entire kingdom. Now, he was not just the king's special advisor, but also gained new respect from the people. His life had taken a new turn, and his mind was constantly filled with new ideas for the betterment of the kingdom. At first, the ministers had undermined the madman's importance, but now, they listened to his words carefully. They had come to realize that no matter how simple he appeared, his wisdom and intellect were unparalleled. One day, the king invited the madman to join him on a journey. The king said, "We need to visit other parts of the kingdom, and I want you to come along, so that you can show us new paths with your wisdom." During this journey, the madman provided the king with new suggestions about the kingdom's issues. His advice improved the kingdom's economy, enhanced the lives of its people, and helped establish peaceful relations with the kingdom's enemies. The king eventually ushered in a new era for his kingdom, one in which truth, wisdom, and loyalty were valued. During this time, the madman's stature grew even higher, and through his wisdom, he became deeply ingrained, not only in the king's heart, but in the hearts of the entire kingdom. This story teaches us that not only outward simplicity, but also inner wisdom and truth can make a person successful in the world. No matter how simple we may appear, if we accept our truth and follow the path of honesty, we can achieve anything with God's help. The message of this story is that the deserving always shapes their own destiny, and the one who struggles with a sincere heart, God helps them achieve success.